The three most powerful men in New York City sat in separate rooms that night, each holding a photograph of the same woman, each convinced he alone understood what she represented. None of them realized she'd sent the photographs herself. Nia Carter had returned to New York on a Tuesday in October, when the city smelled like rain and burnt coffee and the particular kind of ambition that made men forget their limitations. She carried one suitcase, wore a coat that cost less than most people assumed, and walked through Penn Station like someone who'd measured every step before taking it. The return wasn't sentimental. Her father had been dead for 3 months, and his lawyer had been explicit. Come home, or everything burns. She took a room in a hotel near Columbus Circle, neutral territory. In the kind of place where business travelers stayed and no one asked questions. From her window on the 14th floor, she could see the separation of kingdoms, the glass towers of Manhattan stretching south, the industrial sprawl of Brooklyn to the east, and if she looked north on a clear day, the brownstone dignity of Harlem where the real power had always lived quieter. Her father, Leonard Carter, had been a ghost in the official records. No arrest sheet, no known associations, no headlines. But he'd been the architect. The man who'd sat 3 young criminals down 26 years ago and drawn the map that still governed the city. Vincent Moretti had the banks and the legacy families. Luca DeSanto had the muscle and the docks. Marcus Kane had the culture and the legitimacy. Leonard Carter had given them the blueprint for coexistence, the mathematical precision that kept them from mutual destruction. And now Leonard was gone, and the blueprint had an expiration date no one had seen coming. Nia understood what they'd think when they learned she was back. That she was lost, vulnerable, perhaps even useful. Men like that always mistook composure for compliance, silence for ignorance. They'd been making that mistake about women since the first man convinced himself that kingdoms were built on strength instead of information. The first one to reach out was Vincent. She found his card slipped under her hotel room door on the second morning. Cream-colored stock, engraved lettering, an address in Midtown, and a phone number with no name attached. The kind of summons that pretended to be an invitation. She waited 3 days before calling, long enough to make him wonder, short enough to seem curious rather than hostile. They met at a restaurant he owned, the kind of place with a name in Italian and waiters who moved like ballet dancers. Vincent Moretti sat at a corner table in a suit that probably cost more than her first car, silver threading through his dark hair, hands folded on the white tablecloth like a man posing for a Renaissance painting. He stood when she approached. Old world manners, the performance of respect. Miss Carter, he said. Thank you for coming. You didn't leave me much choice, Nia replied, sitting without waiting for him to pull out her chair. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Your father was a remarkable man. His death is a loss to many people. He had cancer, it wasn't a mystery. No, Vincent agreed. But what he left behind, that's more complicated. He poured her wine she didn't touch. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversations, with the sound of money being spent carefully and power being exercised without volume. Vincent leaned back, studying her with the expression of a man evaluating property. Leonard maintained certain understandings, he said, arrangements that benefited everyone involved. I assume you're aware of your father's role? I'm aware he kept 3 fragile egos from destroying each other, Nia said. Is that what you mean by arrangements? Something flickered across Vincent's face. Surprise, maybe irritation. He recovered quickly. Your father had documentation, records of transactions, conversations, agreements. And we need to ensure those materials are handled appropriately. You mean, you want to make sure no one sees them? I mean, they could be misinterpreted. By law enforcement, by competitors, by people who don't understand the historical context. Vincent's voice remained smooth, but his fingers had tensed on the stem of his wineglass. Your father trusted me, Nia. I'd like to extend that same trust to you. You could have a very comfortable life. Protected. Provided for. In exchange for what? Pretending I don't know what I know? In exchange for understanding that some legacies are too valuable to dismantle. Nya met his gaze without blinking. And if I don't understand that? Vincent's smile turned colder. Then I'd have to question whether you understand anything at all. She left without finishing the wine or shaking his hand. Outside, the October air bit through her coat, and she walked 6 blocks before stopping, checking reflections in store windows, making sure no one had followed. Vincent Moretti thought power meant control, that everything could be managed through money and leverage and the careful application of pressure. He'd built his empire on the assumption that order could be imposed, that chaos was the enemy. He had no idea chaos was exactly what she'd come to deliver. Luca DeSanto didn't send a card or make a reservation. He showed up at her hotel room door at 11:30 that same night, with 2 men who looked like they broke things professionally and a bottle of scotch he set on her desk without asking permission. "We need to talk," he said, walking past her into the room like he owned it. Nya closed the door but didn't lock it. Most people call first. Most people aren't me. Luca was younger than Vincent, mid-40s, built like someone who'd done his own violence before delegating it. He wore jeans and a leather jacket, and carried himself with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never been told no in any way that mattered. "You met with Moretti today. That was stupid." "Why?" "Because now everyone knows you're talking. Now Kane's going to think you're making deals. I'm going to think you're making deals. And the whole thing gets complicated." He poured himself scotch, didn't offer her any. "Your old man kept things simple. You should do the same." "Simple how?" "Simple like you tell me where his files are. I make sure nothing happens to you, and we all move forward." Nya sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap. "What makes you think I have files?" "Because Leonard Carter didn't do anything without documentation. Because he was too smart to die without a contingency plan. Because you're here. Which means he told you something before he went." Luca drained his scotch and poured another. "I'm not Vincent. I don't do the polite thing where I pretend this is a negotiation. You give me what I need, or we have a different kind of conversation." A threat. A reality check. He moved closer, not touching her, but invading her space in that way men did when they wanted you to feel small. "You think you can walk back into this city and not pick a side? You think you're protected by some memory of your father? Leonard's dead, sweetheart. Niand, you're standing in the middle of a war you don't understand with information that could get you killed 6 different ways. Then why haven't you killed me already?" The question stopped him. Luca's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Nia saw the calculation behind the performance. The realization that she wasn't afraid. Or if she was, fear wasn't controlling her decisions. "Because I knew your father," he said finally. "Because he asked me for a favor once, and I don't forget debts. But that credit runs out, you understand? You want protection? You want to stay alive in this city? You work with me. Not Moretti, not Kane. Me. And if I work with you, what happens to them? That's my problem, not yours." Nia stood, moving to the window, looking out at the city lights. "My father built something that required all 3 of you. Take away one, and the whole structure collapses. You know that. Structures can be rebuilt. Not by you." She turned to face him. "You're good at breaking things, Luca. You're very good at fear and force and making people comply. But maintenance? Sustainability? That's not your skill set. Without Vincent's political cover and Kane's legitimacy, you're just another violent criminal the FBI would love to make an example of." His face darkened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. That's why you're here at midnight trying to intimidate me instead of just taking what you want." Because you're not sure. Because somewhere in that limited strategic thinking of yours, you understand that I might be the only person who knows how this all actually works. Luca moved fast, each grabbing her arm, not violently, but firm enough to make his point. Careful. Or what? Nia's voice didn't rise. You'll hurt me? Kill me? Then you'll never find the files, never know what my father documented, never understand what he set in motion before he died. Is that really the play you want to make? He held her arm for another 3 seconds before releasing it. The men by the door hadn't moved, but their attention had sharpened, waiting for orders that didn't come. This isn't over, Luca said. It hasn't even started. He left the scotch. She poured it down the sink after they were gone and stood at the window until 3 in the morning, watching the city breathe, thinking about how easy it was to make powerful men show you their weakness. Luca de Santo thought power was about dominance, meant about making people submit through superior force. He'd never learned that the most dangerous fights weren't the ones you saw coming. Marcus Kane didn't reach out at all for the first week. That was how she knew he was the most dangerous. She went about her days carefully, methodically. She visited her father's old apartment in Washington Heights, now empty except for dust and memories. She met with his lawyer, a small, efficient man named Hirsch, who handed her 3 keys and a handwritten note that said only, "You'll know when." She walked through neighborhoods like she was mapping a city she'd never left, eating breakfast in diners where old men read newspapers and speaking to no one who didn't serve her food. And she waited for Marcus Kane to show himself. He finally did on a Sunday morning in Riverside Park, appearing beside her on a bench so quietly she didn't hear him approach. One moment she was alone, watching joggers and dogs and the Hudson River moving south, and the next, he was there, wearing dark slacks and a charcoal sweater, hands resting on his knees, eyes forward like they were old friends who'd arranged to meet. "Naya," he said. Just her name. No preamble. "Mr. Kane." "Marcus." He still wasn't looking at her. "Your father used to bring you here when you were 8, 9 years old. Saturday mornings. You'd feed the pigeons even though he told you it was illegal." She felt something cold settle in her chest. "I didn't know you were watching." "I wasn't. Leonard told me. He talked about you more than you probably realize." Marcus finally turned to face her, and Naya understood why this man controlled Harlem without ever raising his voice. His eyes were older than his face, sharp and patient and completely unreadable. "He was proud of you. The degrees, the clean life, staying away from all this." "Then why did he call me back?" "Because clean doesn't mean safe, and because he knew what was coming." Marcus stood, gestured for her to walk with him. They moved along the path slowly, 2 people having a conversation that looked casual from any distance, but Naya could feel the weight of it, the way his presence changed the air around them. "Leonard Carter saved my life," Marcus said. "Not metaphorically. Literally. 27 years ago, I was bleeding out in an alley in Sugar Hill with 3 bullets in me and no reason to think I'd see morning. Your father found me, got me to a doctor, kept me alive, never asked for anything in return." He paused. "I owe him everything I built, everything I became. Do you understand that?" "Yes." "Then you understand why I'm the only one of the 3 who won't try to manipulate you, threaten you, or pretend this is business." Marcus stopped walking, faced her fully. "Leonard left you something that scares Vincent and Luca. They think it's evidence, leverage, insurance. They think it's about power. What do you think it is?" "The truth." His voice was quiet, absolute. "And the truth is that the arrangement your father created was never sustainable. It was always temporary. A treaty held together by the fact that one man knew everyone's secrets and had no reason to use them. But Leonard's gone now. And without him, each the 3 of us are just criminals with incompatible ambitions and too much history." Nya watched a woman throw a tennis ball for a golden retriever, watched the dog's pure, uncomplicated joy at the chase. If you know it can't last, why not walk away? Because walking away means abandoning everything I built, everyone who depends on me, the legitimate businesses, the community programs, the kids who have jobs because I created them. Marcus's jaw tightened. I didn't get into this life to be a criminal. I got in to survive, and then I got trapped by my own success. That sounds like an excuse. It's an explanation. There's a difference. He started walking again. Vincent thinks he can buy his way out of this. Luca thinks he can fight his way through it. They're both wrong. The only way forward is if someone makes a choice that none of us can make ourselves. And you think I'm that someone. I think you're Leonard Carter's daughter. I think you're smarter than all three of us. And I think you came back here with a purpose that has nothing to do with money or safety or any of the things they're offering you. Marcus stopped at a point where the path curved, and you could see the George Washington Bridge in the distance. I also think you're angry. At him, at us, at the whole architecture of this life, and anger makes people unpredictable. Nya turned to face him. Are you asking me what I want? I'm telling you I already know. You want to burn it all down. The question is whether you understand the cost. They stood there for a long moment, the October wind moving through the trees, and the city humming around them with its 10,000 small urgencies. Marcus Kane was right about some things and wrong about others, but he was the only one of the three who'd bothered to actually see her as a threat instead of a problem. My father told me something before he died, Naya said, about the night the three of you made your agreement, about what you each brought to the table and what you each promised to protect. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. What did he tell you? That the whole thing was built on a lie, that the balance only worked because none of you knew the full story, that he'd designed it that way on purpose, as insurance. She met his eyes. He told me which pieces were real and which were performance, and he told me that if I ever shared that information, the empire would collapse in about 72 hours. Will you? I don't know yet. Marcus nodded slowly, like this was the answer he'd expected. Then I should tell you something your father never knew, about why I really owe him my life. I'm listening. The night he found me in that alley, I wasn't there by accident. I'd been set up. Betrayed by someone I trusted. Someone who wanted me dead so they could take my territory. Your father saved me, but he never asked who did it. Never pushed. Marcus's voice dropped. It was Vincent Moretti. 27 years ago, before any of us were who we became, Vincent tried to have me killed. And Leonard never knew he'd saved the life of a man who'd been targeted by the same person he'd later helped build into a king. The information settled like a stone in dark water. Nia processed the implications, the web of debts and betrayals and compromised foundations. Does Vincent know you know? No. And that's been my insurance policy for 27 years. Marcus looked at her. But if you're planning what I think you're planning, that information might be useful. Why are you telling me this? Because unlike Vincent and Luca, I don't underestimate you, and because I'd rather have some control over how this ends than pretend I can stop it from ending at all. He pulled a card from his pocket, plain white, just a phone number. When you're ready to move, call me first, not for protection, for coordination. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the Sunday morning crowd like smoke. Nya stood alone, holding the card, understanding that Marcus Kane had just given her exactly what she needed. Confirmation that none of the three kings trusted each other, and that the foundation her father had built was even more fragile than they realized. The deterioration started small. A shipment of Luca's weapons disappeared from a warehouse in Red Hook. One of Vincent's judges got arrested in an FBI sting that seemed too well informed to be accidental. A community center Marcus funded in Harlem had its permits mysteriously revoked by city officials who'd been cooperative for years. Each king blamed the others. Phone calls were made, meetings requested and refused, old agreements questioned. The temperature rose degree by degree, and Nia watched from her hotel room as the city she'd been born in started to tear itself apart. She'd sent them each a gift. Different information to each man, carefully selected from her father's files. To Vincent, evidence that Luca had been skimming from joint ventures, pocketing money that should have been split 3 ways. To Luca, documentation that Vincent had been slowly buying up property in Brooklyn through shell companies, preparing to squeeze him out. To Marcus, recordings of both Vincent and Luca discussing how to marginalize his influence, dismissing him as legitimate cover for their real business. All of it was true. All of it had been documented by Leonard Carter as insurance, kept secret for decades, preserved as ammunition for exactly this purpose. And all of it was designed to make each man believe the others had been betraying him from the beginning. Nia watched the news, read the papers, listened to the city's pulse. One a shooting in Williamsburg, 2 of Luca's men killed in what looked like a professional hit. A Manhattan DA suddenly very interested in reopening old investigations into Vincent's business dealings. A community leader in Harlem stepping down after anonymous allegations of corruption tied to Marcus's funding. The 3 kings were destroying each other with remarkable efficiency, each one convinced he was defending himself against betrayal. None of them realizing they were following a script written before any of them had picked up the phone. It was Marcus who figured it out first. He called her on a Wednesday night, 3 weeks after their conversation in the park. "It's you," he said without introduction. "You're orchestrating this." "Am I?" "Leonard's files. You've been feeding us information designed to destabilize the alliance. The question is why?" Nya stood at her hotel window looking out at the city lights. "You said yourself it was never sustainable. I'm just accelerating the inevitable. People are dying. People have been dying for 27 years. The difference is now you're paying attention." Silence on the line. Then, "What's your endgame?" "The same as my father's. Except he wanted to preserve what you built. I want to make sure it can't be rebuilt." "You're making a mistake," Marcus said. "You think you can control the chaos, but chaos doesn't work that way. Once this starts, it won't stop where you want it to. Then stop it yourself. Walk away. Take your legitimate businesses and your community programs and leave the crime behind." "It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple. You just don't want to admit it." Nia's voice was calm, factual. "My father spent 27 years enabling 3 men to build empires on violence and exploitation while pretending they were something more. Vincent thinks he's legitimate because he wears expensive suits. Luca thinks he's honorable because he's loyal to his own. You think you're noble because you give back to the community you're also bleeding dry, but you're all the same. You're all criminals who convinced yourselves the kingdom was worth the cost." "And what are you?" Marcus asked. "The judge? The executioner?" "I'm the daughter of the man who made you possible, and I'm done pretending that's something to be proud of." She hung up. 2 days later, Vincent Moretti requested a meeting. All 4 of them, Vincent, Luca, Marcus, and Naya. Neutral ground, no weapons, or just conversation, the kind of summit that happened in movies before everything went to hell. Naya agreed. They met in a warehouse in Long Island City, one of those anonymous industrial spaces that could have belonged to anyone. 4 chairs, 1 table, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Vincent arrived first, flanked by lawyers who stayed by the entrance. Luca came next with his usual guards. Marcus walked in alone, which somehow made him seem more dangerous than the others. Nia was already sitting when they arrived. She'd been there for an hour, waiting, letting them come to her. Vincent spoke first. "This needs to end." "What needs to end?" Nia asked. "Whatever game you're playing, whatever point you're trying to make." He leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "Your father maintained peace because he understood the value of stability. You're destroying that because, what? Revenge? Ideology? Daddy issues? Luca laughed, sharp and bitter. She's destroying it because she can. Because we gave her the leverage by trusting Leonard. And now we're paying the price. I never trusted Leonard, Vincent said. I tolerated him because the alternative was worse. And yet, here we are, Marcus said quietly. 3 intelligent men brought to the edge of war by a woman we all underestimated. They looked at her then, all 3 of them, and Naya saw the calculation happening behind their eyes, the weighing of options, the measuring of threats, the desperate search for some way to regain control of a situation that had slipped away from them entirely. My father kept 3 keys, Nia said. Literal keys, not metaphorical ones. Each key opens a safe deposit box in a different bank. Each box contains evidence of crimes committed by one of you: murder, fraud, conspiracy, things that statute of limitations won't save you from, things that would end you. The temperature in the room dropped. He told me which key went to which box, she continued. He told me that as long as the 3 of you maintained the balance, the keys would stay with him. Insurance to keep you honest. But now he's gone, and the keys are with me, and the balance is broken. So this is extortion, Luca said. No. This is consequences. Nya pulled 3 envelopes from her bag, placed them on the table. These contain the locations of your respective boxes, the evidence that could destroy each of you. I'm giving them to you freely. Vincent frowned. Why? Because my father was wrong. He thought power meant controlling people through fear, through leverage, through the constant threat of exposure. He thought he could manage your ambitions by holding your destruction over your heads. She stood. But that's not power. That's just a different kind of prison. For him as much as for you. Marcus was watching her carefully. What do you want, Nia? I want you to understand what you've built. I want you to see it clearly, without the rationalizations and the justifications and the stories you tell yourselves about honor and legacy and necessity. She looked at each of them in turn. My father died believing he'd created something important, but all he really did was enable 3 violent men to pretend they were kings. And I'm done protecting that lie. She walked toward the door. Wait, Vincent said. If you're giving us the locations, what's to stop us from just destroying the evidence? Naya smiled for the first time since entering the warehouse. Nothing. You should absolutely destroy the evidence. All of you. Go to your boxes, burn the files, erase the records. Convince yourselves you're safe. Then what was the point? Luca asked. The point is that I made copies, and I've distributed them to 5 different lawyers, journalists, and federal agents with instructions to release everything if I don't check in every 72 hours. So yes, destroy your evidence. It won't matter, because the real insurance policy isn't in those boxes anymore. It's in the fact that I'm the only thing standing between you and complete exposure. The silence was total. You played us, Marcus said, not angry, almost admiring. I gave you what you wanted. You wanted control. Now you have it. Over the evidence, over the narrative, over your own fates. The only variable you can't control is me. Naya opened the door. My father spent 27 years convinced that power meant having leverage over people. But real power is making people realize they never had control in the first place. The arrest started 3 days later. Vincent Moretti was taken into federal custody on a Tuesday morning, handcuffed in his own restaurant by agents who'd been building their case for months. The charges were extensive: money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder. Evidence that matched exactly what had been in his safe deposit box. The box he'd visited immediately after the warehouse meeting, the box he'd emptied and burned. He'd fallen for the oldest trick, destroying evidence that had already been copied, thinking he was protecting himself while actually confirming every crime through his own panicked actions. Luca DeSanto went down harder. Federal and state agents hit 6 of his locations simultaneously: warehouses, fronts, the homes of his top soldiers. They found weapons, drugs, financial records, everything needed to dismantle his organization completely. Luca tried to fight, actually pulled a gun before someone with more sense tackled him. He'd die in prison, probably. That kind of violence always caught up eventually. Marcus Kane was different. The evidence existed. Nya had seen it in her father's files. Documentation of murders Marcus had ordered, of bribes paid, of systems corrupted in the service of building his empire. She'd made copies just like the others. She'd distributed them to the same lawyers and journalists. But she'd added a note. Just for Marcus. A separate envelope delivered by courier the morning before the arrests began. Inside was a plane ticket to Ghana, a passport in a different name, bank account information for funds that would support him comfortably for the rest of his life, and a letter in her handwriting. You were right about my father saving your life. You were wrong about why I came back. I didn't come to burn it all down. I came to give you a choice Vincent and Luca never deserved: leave or stay and face what you've done. You have 12 hours. Marcus Kane disappeared that afternoon. The community centers he'd funded continued operating under new management, and the legitimate businesses were sold to employees who'd been running them anyway. The criminal enterprise crumbled without his strategic mind, absorbed by smaller operators and gradually dismantled by law enforcement. He sent her one message 3 weeks later. Just 2 words. Thank you. Nya Carter stayed in New York for another month, wrapping up her father's affairs, meeting with prosecutors who wanted her testimony, declining offers from federal agents who thought she might be useful in other investigations. She was polite, cooperative, and completely unhelpful in any way that mattered. She visited her father's grave once, in a cemetery in Queens where the headstones were modest and the grass grew wild between the rows. She stood there for 20 minutes, not crying, not speaking, just existing in proximity to the man who'd shaped her life by trying to keep her away from his. You were brilliant, she said finally, and you were wrong. About power, about control, about what mattered. The wind moved through the cemetery, carrying the smell of cut grass and distant rain. I hope you knew I loved you anyway. She left New York on a Thursday in December, when the city was starting to prepare for winter and the lights were coming on earlier each day. She took the same suitcase she'd arrived with, wore the same coat, walked through Penn Station with the same measured steps. But something had changed. Not in the city. The city would always be itself, would always generate new variations of the same old violence and ambition and desperate reaching for power. The change was in her, and in the understanding that she'd inherited her father's gift for architecture, but none of his illusions about what could be built. The 3 kings of New York had fallen, not because she'd destroyed them. They'd done that themselves, through the choices they'd made long before she returned. She'd just helped them see what they'd been building all along: empires of sand, held together by fear and violence and the willing suspension of reality. Her father had spent his life maintaining that suspension, believing it was worth preserving. Nya had spent one autumn proving it was always going to collapse. On the train out of the city, she opened her father's final letter, the one his lawyer had given her with the 3 keys, the one she'd waited until now to read. My brilliant girl, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you've made your choice. I knew what that choice would be. You were always smarter than me, more honest, less willing to compromise with the reality of power. I built something terrible and called it necessary. I enabled monsters and called them kings. I spent 27 years convincing myself that managing chaos was the same as preventing it. You'll do better. Not because you're kinder. You're not. particularly, but because you understand that some things shouldn't be managed. They should be ended. The three keys, the boxes, the evidence. It's all real. But the real gift I'm leaving you isn't information, it's permission to burn it down, to walk away, to refuse the architecture I spent my life building. I was never brave enough to do it myself, but I raised a daughter who was. I'm sorry I didn't tell you this when I was alive. I'm sorry I didn't protect you from this world by staying out of it myself. I'm sorry for all the ways my choices became your inheritance. But I'm not sorry you came back. And I'm not sorry for what you'll do next. With love and regret, Dad Naya folded the letter, placed it back in her bag, and watched the city recede through the train window. The three most powerful men in New York had sat in separate rooms that night in October, each holding her photograph, each convinced he understood what she represented. None of them had realized she represented the end of their world. And now that world was gone, dismantled by the daughter of its architect, rebuilt as nothing at all. The train carried her south, toward a life she'd built herself, with no keys and no insurance and no leverage over anyone. Just the clean simplicity of existing without empire, of walking through the world unencumbered by the weight of other people's kingdoms. Behind her, New York City hummed and breathed and generated new ambitions, new violences, new men who thought they understood power. Let them learn.